there with the horses on the racetrack, but certainly the test stakes, one we won't soon forget, and it's going to lead our topics this week. But before we get to the big board, welcome in my partner, Jeff Siegel. Jeff, sometimes we have a lot of fun on this show, and other times we kind of have to dial it back. This doesn't seem to be the week to be cheeky.
No, you're right about that. And it's happened now more than it should this year. And just even this summer, it has not been a good Saratoga meeting. All things being considered, right. The rain, the races off the turf, the upsets of the disappointing runs by the stars of the game, the tragedies on the racetrack. It's just been a brutal 3 to 4 weeks there. Right. We still have some time maybe to pick it up and have a great second half of the meeting. And of course, we're looking forward to the Travers and what should be a championship quality race. But what we saw on Saturday on several fronts was just, racing's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good experience. It was on a big Fox Channel 11 out here. It wasn't the Fox Sports thing. It was the main Fox. They had an opportunity to showcase the sport at its best, and it was just one bad thing after another. And it's depressing. It really is. And we've gone through it before. We'll go through it again. We just have to bite the bullet and just move on.
Yeah, it takes its toll. It wears you down, it's one of those where you just kind of want to just throw the form on the pile and walk away for the day. And a lot of folks did on Saturday. And I got to say, I was fortunate that I have not seen the breakdown of Maple Leaf Mel to this point.
You are fortunate, then, yeah.
I was watching the telecast. I flipped over to NFL Network. They had an interview with Baker Mayfield that I wanted to see. There was 7 minutes to post. I thought I'd get back in time. By the time I got back, they were already in the pull-up, and they were talking about Pretty Mischievous being the unofficial winner of the race at that point. And you could just tell the tones from Lafitte and the crew there that something was amiss. And obviously, a couple seconds later, the news reports started to come in, from the broadcast about what had happened by the finish line. No replays shown, no replays available after the race. So I have not seen it. And I got to say, I'm happy about that fact. But we don't duck topics on this show. We will talk about the great racing we saw over the weekend and around the world in just a bit, so hang with us. But we don't want to avoid the big topics and the important things to discuss on this program. So let's start with the somber Saturday at Saratoga that we had. Maple Leaf Mel, who was unbeaten in her career. She'd never been headed to any point in her life. She was on the lead, ready to win the test stakes before her tragic breakdown in that race. What a story with trainer Melanie Giddings, a survivor of stage 4 cancer just a couple years ago. Former Jeremiah Engelhardt assistant took over the training of Maple Leaf Mel in her last couple starts. And Jeff, she was on her way to a potential championship. You're talking about a filly who was going to be 6 for 6 in just another stride or two before her fateful end. And this is about as bad as it gets when you think about the scenario. No breakdown is a good one, but this one just kind of hits hard.
On so many fronts. For all the things that you mentioned about winning this race and perhaps on her way to a championship, grade 1 event, to have it happen right 15 feet from the wire when it, was already had conceded that she'd won the race, and then have it being snatched away like that. Just tragic, especially. And I don't think Melanie is worried too much about winning the test or the money and all that. This is like losing a member of her family, and how close she is with her small stable, and especially to have a filly like this. It's cruel. It's cruel. I remember I've only seen 2 other situations like this from my standpoint that is even close to it. That's the breakdown of Ruffian. Obviously, I saw that on television back in the 70s when she had run maybe a quarter of a mile and then she went down, and the way she had broken down, you knew it was going to be catastrophic. And Ruffian was one of the most, she was most popular, one of the most popular racing fillies of her time. And then, of course, I was at Belmont Park in 1990. We'd run her horse in the Breeders' Cup that day to see, and then saw Go for Juan do the same thing at the 16th pole. These are champions. These are horses that apparently were on the way to victory. And if you've ever been a part of something like that as an owner or a trainer or even a groom or whatever it is, association may have, it just tears you apart, and it doesn't go away. So I can't even imagine what Melanie must be thinking. Obviously, Bill Parcells, the owner, I mean, he's had ups and downs. I'm sure he's devastated as well. But everybody who happened to see that race is never going to forget it. Just like I never forgot what I saw with Ruffian or Go for One. I'm never going to forget this. It doesn't happen that often, but it happens.
And those 2-star fillies, of course, immortalized with races in their name, major graded stakes races, the Ruffian, the Go for One. Might someday we see one for Maple Leaf Mel,
Yep.
certainly in the New York bred ranks. Being a New York bred would certainly be appropriate. As for, the whys, the hows, the what do we do about it? So, look, there's a lot in the racing game right now. Santa Anita being one of the leaders in trying to forecast injuries before they happen and try to detect them before they happen and get horses who are in danger off of the racetrack. Other circuits around the country hopefully will follow the lead to that. I have a little bit of an issue with the breeding industry. I got to be honest with you, Jeff.
I read that, yeah.
You took a look at a horse like Cross Traffic, the sire here of this horse, didn't race at all until 4 years old, only made 6 starts, period. The dam only raced 5 times. The dam sire never made it to the track, yet went to stud, City Place. I mean, there's just a lot about pedigrees and horses who aren't sound that are being bred and going to stud, and you wonder about that, and you wonder where the ultimate responsibility falls. It falls 2 places, right? With the trainers who send horses out to the track and the breeders who put the horses on this earth to start with, and so if the old saying was breed the best to the best and hope for the best, but that has not been the case in American breeding in the last however many years. And people older than me may say it goes back even more decades than we want to talk about. But you can't find a trainer in America who says their horses are as durable now as they used to be. Everyone will tell you the horses aren't that durable. The greatest horse we've seen in the last 20 years was a horse who barely made it to the track in flight line just a handful of times and had to take long layoffs in between his starts. So even the great ones, I don't want to say damaged goods, but I guess damaged goods. They're not strong and sturdy and fit like they were maybe in yesteryear. Maybe we just know more now and we see more races now, and yesteryear wasn't as great as we think it might have been. But I can't find a horseman on this planet that tells me horses are sturdier now than they were years ago. And we've got to get back to sturdy if we want to try to keep public perception where it should be on the great parts of this game and not public perception on the worst parts of this game, which are any breakdown that we have, certainly ones that end up in a tragic situation where a horse has to be put down. So to me, it starts where it starts, which is in the conception of these racehorses and in the breeding of these racehorses. And if you got to look anybody in the mirror today and say, I'm pissed off because of what happened with Make Believe Mel, I'm mad at the breeders in this game. And I'm not saying it's personally responsible for this particular horse, but the overarching problem of horses not being as sound as they used to be can't be blamed on a bettor. It can't be blamed on a fan. It can't be blamed on a marketing department. It can't be blamed on a trainer. It goes back to the breeders. They are the ones who put the matings together. And I guess to the buyers as well, because you go to the sale, and if you're willing to spend 6, 7, 8 figures on damaged goods, then they're going to keep producing damaged goods. So at some point, somebody has to say enough is enough.
Well, if I were czar, and I'm not, and what I'm about to say will never happen, so this is just a pie in the sky wish. But I think what you just said is true, but I think you have to blame the 2-year-old in training sales too. This filly went in the Eastern Timonium sale. They breezed the life out of them, an eighth, a quarter. They're barely 2 years old. They're not looking, they being the consigners, they have only one goal, to get as much money as they can, right, and to have these fillies or colts, these 2-year-olds underdeveloped, breeze as fast as they can, as hard as they can, so they can sell them. That's part of the problem. I think there's probably 15 to 20% of all racehorses go through these sales. So already you're starting behind the 8 ball. And then you're breeding horses that have been medicated upon medicated upon medicated for 20 generations now. There was no such thing back in the 50s and 60s when these quote unquote sturdier horses were racing. Now, I mean, they're bred to be unsound because they themselves were sound, and whatever injuries that they had aren't masked, and they're not weeded out of the breeding system because they're just put back to stud because they were running on medication. That's never going to change, unfortunately, but that's part of the problem. The other thing is, again, something that would never happen, but I send my horses, when I have young horses, I send them to tracks that have all-weather surfaces. I think they're safer. I think they've proven to be safer. They're easier on the horse. I sent my horses to Golden Gate to train even if they weren't going to run there. I'd bring them back home. I would do that. I think the statistics have proven that horses that race on all-weather surfaces are traditionally safer. And would I'd love to see every track go that way? Yes. Will it happen? Absolutely not. But if you're talking about a problem and you think you have a solution and you don't want to go to that solution for whatever reason, then maybe you only have yourself to blame.
Wise words there from Mr. Siegel. We could talk about Pretty Mischievous now, probably going on to the 3-year-old champion. She was the winner first across the wire in the test stakes. Brendan Walsh, her trainer, really didn't want to celebrate the victory. Took the laurels and the flowers the next morning to the barn of Maple Leaf Mill, where they were handed over to the connections there. I don't even want to talk about the 3-year-old championship at this point. Let's go to our second topic here and go to another story, a big story Saturday at Saratoga, the return of the Babe to the winner's circle. Rick Dutrow, banned 10 years from racing for medication infractions and going afoul with the jurisdiction in the state of New York, is back after his April return, and he was back in a big way at Saratoga on Saturday when White Abarrio won the Whitney Stakes. There's Dutrow on the track, courtesy of Eclipse Thoroughbred Photography. And of course, after getting his first win earlier this year at Belmont, you see the photo there. Dutrow's aged a little bit over the years, but he's back to his winning ways. And White Abarrio, a horse who was with Safi Joseph Jr. until just 2 starts back, has suddenly turned it into afterburner mode.
It's still Giant Game and White Abarrio puts his gray head in front, coming to the quarter pole. Zandon's had a beautiful trip, angling out. Cody's Wish has a lot of work to do from there, and Charge It is trying to rally there at the top of the stretch in the Whitney, and White Abarrio is the leader narrowly over Giant Game. Zandon, Cody's Wish on the outside, still 4 lengths behind White Abarrio, who's running the race of his life. Look at White Abarrio and Arad Ortiz Jr. in a runaway. White Abarrio wins by almost 6 lengths. Zandon second, photo for third, Cody's Wish, and Charge It. Rick Dutrow Jr. takes the Whitney with White Abarrio.
So do we celebrate the return of Dutrow, or do we kind of hold our nose on a day, Jeff, where it was feeling unsavory at Saratoga? Of course, this just a couple races after what we had seen and talked about in the test stakes with Maple Leaf Mill. Now Dutrow comes off the naughty list and takes Saratoga's biggest summer race, beats Cody's Wish. Look, if there are racing gods who are trying to put storylines together, Rick Dutrow never beats Cody Dorman at the track, and Cody's Wish with Cody Dorman there to watch him. Things don't play out in Hollywood. That's not the way that it works, but the way that it turned out in the Whitney Stakes is White Abarrio looked better than he's ever looked in his career. He's been moved up tremendously off Safi Joseph in his last 2 starts with 106, I believe 110 buyers in his last 2. How much has Dutrow moved this horse up, and how much can we believe it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing about that somber Saturday we talked about. It's bad enough that we had that tragic breakdown, but now one of the most popular racehorses in America with the great storylines and the national coverage that Cody Wish had gotten, looked like he was on his way to Horse of the Year. And I was afraid this might happen. I wanted him to win. I'm a racing fan really first. And I looked at his form and whether or not I thought this was the right thing to do, because he'd been there, done that, won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile last year. Now you got to give him a chance to step out of his comfort zone. But I went back and watched the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And in that race, which was a 2-turn race, and that's the difference between 1-turn and 2-turn. You saw his Metropolitan Mile at 1-turn was spectacular in his last start. But in his previous mile race, in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, which was a 2-turn race, it went 45 and 3 to the half, finished out in 135 and 1, which means it went the second half of that race 20 to 25 lengths slower. And Cody's Wish, a deep closer, barely got up. I mean, he wasn't really even finishing that race. He was just outstaying the tiring leaders. And I'm saying he should have blown that field off the track if he was as good around 2 turns. as he had been going around one term. So I had my worries about, maybe if they go 24-48 and he makes that move, he's not going to kick it in. And he didn't. And even Bill Mott said I think Bill Mott tried to say, I was afraid this might happen. But you got to try it. And now we back up. And now he's going to go back to the Breeders' Cup Mile, he said, pointing for that. But that's a 2-turn race.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Cody's Wish is like a horse without a home in a sense that he only can. We saw this with Practical Joke a few years ago and how good he was, but he couldn't go 2 turns. Well, some horses are like that. It doesn't matter whether it's a mile or whatever. It's the second turn that does them in, and the race shape, the race flow that accompanies it that goes against their style. So with Cody's Wish falling flat on his face literally at the start and then at the end of the race as well, that just put a capper on what was a truly miserable Saturday. As for White Abarrio, he had lost 7 out of his last 8 races. I've liked him. I'm never in sync with him. I have absolutely no idea when he's going to run good. And I didn't particularly like him here, Dutrow or not. And he earns a 110 buyer number. He wins off by himself. And in an older handicap division now, which is completely void of consistency, is he not the best older horses in the country right now based on this race? I don't know. And I don't know whether I can trust him or not. But so far, that's what he did. And Zandon ran his race, which is Zandon. You know what he's worth. Charge it. Can't figure him out either. And then, of course, Cody's Wish didn't run. So the great visual race that White Abarrio ran with an absolute pristine trip. Sat second. Nobody in his face. Nobody on the outside to press him. No dirt in his face. Moderate fractions. I mean, does this race flatter him? I don't know. I'm not going to get sucked in until I see him take heat and pressure. But right now, he's the king of the mountain.
Yeah, that's a 1 1/8. We got to go the 1 1/4. That's the only distance that matters when you talk about Breeders' Cup Classics. So, we'll find out if White Abarrio is as good at a 1 1/4. Dutrow's explanation for how well he ran was that they gave the horse 2 months off, and he's like, "We knew this horse runs great with 2 months rest." I don't know if he doesn't know that there are dates in the racing form, but White Abarrio was 1 for 4 off of layoffs in his career. I mean, where was the fantastic performance off a 2-month break prior to this? I don't know. So now they say they're going to lay the horse off until the Breeders' Cup Classic. He won't run again from Saratoga then because obviously he's a great horse with 2 months off. I mean, that's what we're led to believe from a guy who was banned for 10 years. Look, I get it. There are people who like Dutrow. There are people who I like who like Dutrow, So I can't just square it off and say A is bad, B is good, right? I mean, obviously, life is a lot more nuanced than that. And smart people I know think he got a raw deal. Smart people I know think he's one of the worst seeds that have been down the pike in racing. So where that falls, I don't know, but it's a personal choice. For me, I don't like it. He picks up White Abarrio and the horse just, leaps forward. I don't know. He's 3 for 29 since the comeback. So it's not like all of a sudden there was a switch flipped and all these Dutrow horses are winning like crazy. Okay. So let's be honest there, to be accusatory that he's moved this horse up and whatever. He has 3 for 29 since the comeback, but he's got 14 seconds in third. So he's got 12 for 29 in the exact. His horses are running pretty well since his return. He's a career 25% trainer. The win percentage right now at 3 for 29, not what you expect from Dutrow. I'm sure it'll improve, but when you get a big one like this, like the Whitney, this is his biggest win since coming back the first week of April to the training game. If you like him, you're happy and you feel vindicated that he's back in the game and he's back in the winner's circle. If you don't like him, you say, Saturday sucked and this didn't make it any better. That's just the bottom line. And so however you fall on the personality scale, I guess, is, and your personal relationship with people, because there are other people in the game who are fans of trainers who I'm not, and I'm fans of trainers who other people aren't. So, where your personal relationships go and how well you know people and what you like and what you don't like. I mean, that's all part of the game. That's part of sports, right? I mean, we've got people we like, we got people we boo, and we go to the games on Saturdays to find out which side is going to win. Let's move to our third topic on the board this week, and now it starts to get into just the racing side of things.
Yes, I'm all for that.
One's at the top of the game. But we're going to go across the pond to find some good Breeders' Cup prep races. Not necessarily Breeders' Cup prep races, but races that could have Breeders' Cup implications, including Paddington, who is just incredible right now for trainer Aidan O'Brien overseas.
Right.
Paddington's won 7 in a row. He's won 4 straight Grade 1 races, and there's talk of Paddington in the same breath from this trainer going back to Giants Causeway. Let's see how good Paddington was winning last weekend at Glorious Goodwood in the Sussex.
The racing on down towards the final quarter mile. Paddington now in front by a half a length over the ridden along in spiral. Factor Cheval in the pink and black is beginning to pick up. Then Charin Eldari now looks beaten. The racing down to the final furlong. It's Paddington who leads the way, but it's hard at it. Factor Cheval trying to challenging. Out can out there towards the strength of the track. It's Paddington from Factor Cheval and the run towards the line. It's Paddington. He's still going to be unbeaten this season. He's going to win the Sussex Stakes. Paddington has beaten Factor Cheval. Charin back in third, Eldari fourth, and last of 5 in spiral.
High praise from a high-octane barn who's had some of the greatest stars of the last couple decades. If he's as good as Giants Causeway, in fact, Aidan O'Brien said he's quicker than Giants Causeway. How good can Paddington be?
Well, I can tell you how good he is now, and that is he got beaten his first start, and he's won 7 in a row since.
Right.
In the highest races that they've got, 3-year-old beating older. And I don't know whether, I mean, we do know that Aidan will obviously frequent the Breeders' Cup, and this horse looks like a Breeders' Cup mile horse, although they're talking about maybe trying him going a little longer. You can run on anything, firm, soft, doesn't matter. And you saw in that video, the Sussex Stakes, a horse that will not be beaten. I mean, you talk about reaching back for reserve energy and power when it's needed the most, when he's seriously challenged with a furlong to go, just lifting himself to win a race like that. It is really hard to imagine him losing a race, although he may not get the accolades that some of the other horses of his ilk would get, because he doesn't always win off by himself. He sort of makes hard work of it, but he wins, and that's the name of the game. And I'm not sure exactly how many more races we'll see. I know originally they thought about bringing him to the Breeders' Cup as a 4-year-old. I thought maybe he wouldn't be seasoned enough this year. But as a dual Derby winner, I think he's seasoned enough for my liking anyway.
Yeah.
And I hope he comes, and whether or not they're going to try the Arc with him, that might be out of his element, but in terms of distance. But boy, I'd like to see him. And again, because he's from a barn that does support the Breeders' Cup, it would not be out of the question to see him out here at Santa Anita.
Yeah, I saw an interview with him after the race, and pretty much everything was on the table. Juddmonte International, August 23rd, may be the next stop. They say he runs really well. When he comes back to the barn, the lads just say he recovers so quickly and he's ready to go again. He runs on short rest, so Paddington could come back August 23rd into Juddmonte International in a couple of weeks. The Arc is possible, the Irish Champions, and maybe even a trip to the Cox Plate in Australia, the connections have been talking about. That would be the week before the Breeders' Cup, so it would be one or the other if they would go Cox Plate or Breeders' Cup at the end of the year. So a lot on the table for Paddington, one of the absolute stars in Europe right now. In the filly and mare turf division, we had a potential horse rise up again. Another one who's on a hot streak, winning 3 in a row and 7 of her last 8. Elle Houston, and she worked hard for the money in her win last weekend overseas.
When it's above the curve, and Elle Houston, Blue Rose Sen has got to get out of trouble over there from Never Ending Story, and then Carnarvon, and here comes Holly. Holly's coming down the outside on Nashwa, and Nashwa really picking up, and Blue Rose Sen is imprisoned on the inside as they race down to the final furlong. Above the curve, Elle Houston, Nashwa storming down the outside, needs to find a little bit more. Then Blue Rose Sen, they race into the closing stages. Elle Houston from Nashwa and Blue Rose Sen, and it's Elle Houston, further Group 1 glory for Shadwell and Jim Crowley. Elle Houston has won the Nassau. From above the curve, Blue Rose Sen looking unlucky. Nashwa never quite reeling them back.
Looked like she might be in deep water in that uphill climb. She just got stronger to the wire there at Goodwood. What a performance there by Elle Houston. Jeff, filly and mare turf, could we see her here maybe?
Yes, we could. The trainer saying that would be a year-end goal that he would think about. The filly and mare turf this year is 1.25 miles down that hill, that brief downhill run across in the dirt would fit her perfectly. She has now won 7 out of 10 career starts, so she's not some horse that's just getting good. She's always been good. Right. And her time for number, racing post number of 116, very legitimate, puts her right in the hunt with anybody who else wants to come and run in a race, and certainly anything out here in the States that would go in that race. I hope we see her. There's still more racing for her to go, but Al Hooson is legit. She is the kind of European older filly and mare performer that should be in the Breeders' Cup, and I'm glad to see that the trainer has said that would be a year-end possibility, a strong possibility.
And Chad Brown's got a great stable of fillies and mares on the turf, but he doesn't have like a Sister Charlie in his barn right now. Right. So the Americans trying to hold down the fort in the filly and mare turf division may be a little susceptible, and the Europeans are always very tough in the division anyway when they come over. So Al Hooson, one to watch in the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf division. Now, we saw a filly sprinter come across the pond last year, Highfield Princess. She ended up 4th in the Breeders' Cup turf sprint. She got back on the beam after a couple narrow defeats this year. She got back to her winning ways last weekend as well. Let's take a look.
Highfield Princess leads inside the final furlong and draws away. Highfield Princess, she's all class, and Highfield Princess comes clear to win the King George. White Lavender just second from Razel, and then back in 4th, Makarova.
Group 2 King George victory there for Highfield Princess. She's now age 6. Jeff, I'd love to see her back and taking them on at Santa Anita this fall.
35th start of her career, so she has made a steal. 13 wins. I actually liked her a lot in the Breeders' Cup turf sprint at Keeneland last year, based on her form in Europe last year. That was very similar to this. What happened, though, in that race is you go 5.5. There's a relatively short run for these kinds of fillies and mares and sprinters into that far turn, and she kind of didn't show the early zip, and she got kind of hung wide, and she started spinning her wheels. She's not used to having to go that fast early because these races are straightaways. You can kind of fall out of the gate and build up your momentum. You don't have that luxury. She still finished 4th, beating less than 2 lengths, so she actually ran a good race. And after this race, again, the connection saying, yes, we would consider going to the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita again this year. Only this year, it's 6.5 and down the hill. And that, I think, would suit her beautifully because she'd be able to come out of the gate, kind of get her feet underneath her and settle in mid-pack. Now, she was pretty much on lead in this race, but she's won from off the pace. And then kind of fall into it and then kind of build her momentum. And I think it'd be a smart thing to do. Now, there's, Caravel won it last year. There isn't a standout in the division quite yet here. I think it makes sense, and she's that good. At least I thought she was that good last year, and I certainly think she's just as good now as she was then.
Trio of overseas races and horses that you want to keep an eye on as we motor towards autumn. And as we look to the Breeders' Cup tracker as our 4th topic this week, we're going to stay with the Breeders' Cup theme, but go stateside now for a trio of races. We're going to look at one in the Distaff division, one in the juvenile fillies, and one in the turf sprint. The Distaff Performer of the Week last week was none other than Adair Manor. She was in a dogfight at Del Mar.
Home and Elm Driver's tough on the lead. Adair Manor chased after her. And now Desert Dawn from last. And here's Desert Dawn on the outside in the blue cap, coming to make it a 3-way duel. Homeward Bound and Elm Drive hanging on to it. Adair Manor between them. Desert Dawn on the outside. 3 of them come for the wire together in a thriller in the Clement Hirsch. Now Adair Manor gains the ascendancy, and Adair Manor will win. Adair Manor won it. Desert Dawn was second. Elm Drive a valiant third. Behind that came Kirsten Bosch and Fun to Dream.
Adair Manor, Jeff, as a 4-year-old, she's only been beaten once, but this wasn't as electric of a performance as maybe you'd like to see from the 3 to 5 favorite.
No, this is Adair Manor's she likes to lead, but she can sit second. She's sitting second behind Elm Drive, who's basically a sprinter. Not basically, she is a sprinter.
Right.
And Elm Drive makes an easy lead. And again, the same kind of trip that maybe White Barrio got, where you're sitting second on the outside. The fractions are okay, but not blazingly fast. Mm-hmm. You're tracking her, and then all of a sudden you're asked to run from the top of the stretch to the wire, and there's nothing there. She hits the front, but it takes her forever to get by the leader with a perfect trip. Then you've got the closer, Elm Drive, who is dead off form.
Right.
She got a grade 1 win. That's great. Look at her record: 11 starts, 5 wins in 4 seconds. She loves Santa Anita. She's going to come into that Breeders' Cup with a lot of with a very good resume. But man, I'm telling you, you can't. I'm not playing her in the Breeders' Cup if this is the best she can do. That's just the way I say it. I mean, I hate to knock a Grade 1 winner with a record like her, but she's supposed to do better than that, don't you think?
She had been 0 for 3 away from Santa Anita. So you mentioned she gets back to her favorite track for the Breeders' Cup. So maybe you could say, look, she dislikes Del Mar and still got the victory in Grade 1 company. I mean, that's the optimistic viewpoint. This is one you'll want to watch her trade, right? If she's training like gangbusters back at Santa Anita, back towards the Breeders' Cup, maybe you have a little more forgiving of this race in the replays. And maybe she'll get a start in the Zenyatta at Santa Anita after this race, but before the Breeders' Cup is the local prep. Maybe she'll just train right up to the Breeders' Cup. Not sure what the plan is with Adair Manor, but you want to see something between now and then that makes you more excited than what we saw here at Del Mar. But maybe it was the venue. I don't know.
I tell you what, she's going to train great. She always does. She worked in 10-3, and we showed that workout, I think, last week. And, the thing is that she looks like she's great, but then she gets into a race, and when she breezes in at the bridle like this, you think there's so much there, and then when you turn her loose in a race, there's really not that much,
Right.
She just kind of doesn't lift, and again, she wins the race. I don't want to knock her, but I mean, for a filly that, let's put it this way, I've used this occasionally, I'll use it again. She didn't score many points on the goosebump scale as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And I mean, I'll watch her train. I can guarantee you she's going to look great. But I don't trust her. I'm sorry. I mean, and if she goes out and wins it, I tip my hat. But right now, I'm going to be looking elsewhere, I think, until such time as she shows me more than she showed me in this race.
Well, the good thing about that is it's a filly who's probably going to take money, right? And if you don't have confidence in her and the price is short, it becomes a very easy toss, and it can become very beneficial to you as a horse player of tossing those kind when you don't like them and they're being overbet by the public. Now, she's a 4-year-old filly, Adair Manor, a 2-year-old filly who brought herself into the Breeders' Cup discussion at Saratoga in the Adirondack was Bright Work. The John Ortiz trainee made it 3 for 3.
Here you come again is the one to beat, coming to the 8th pole. Streaming now is running a good race, and Bright Work bearing down in the center of the racetrack. And Bright Work takes command and opens up with authority. No doubt about it. Performance from Bright Work, who wins it by 4 widening lengths.
So Bright Work now has won at Keeneland. She's won at Ellis. She's won at Saratoga. Will travel with her track. No question about that. The problem I have, Jeff, is the dam side pedigree says win early and mostly sprints in terms of the gene pool and the dam side. So she's doing what she's bred to do. We talked about breeding and you get what you get. She's bred to win early. She's bred to be a sprinter, and she's doing all that right now at a developed rate higher than some of her other classmates in this 2-year-old class. I don't know about her as they stretch out around 2 turns, but she's doing fine just right now.
Well, and she'll probably, I'm sure she'll run back in the spin away and trying to get it while you can. She's got that, Arabian Night action where she flails on the front, and that's usually not something that you want to see from a route horse. I mean, they work They work hard to go wherever they're going, and it's not like they're just floating there. They're working. But I tell you what, Bright Work, I watched her race in her maiden race at Keeneland, was good. I thought her win against VV's Dream, who I thought was really good and still is. I saw her beat her on the square, and now this race was a good competitive race, and she won that race for fun. So I'm not going to say what she can't do, but I'm with you. I'm kind of want to. I think she could maybe win the spin away if the filly that we're going to talk about in the Stars of the Future segment isn't there, or maybe she will be. But I mean, Bright Work's good. She's really good. But again, get it while you can.
It's Adirondack Stakes. It's a big feature at Saratoga early in the meet. But you go back and you look at the past winners. I looked over the last 15 years. There were really 3 names that stood out in 15 years. So a lot of years it's won by horses who don't go on to a lot of success. But the winners who were successful later on, Cavorting, My Miss Aurelia, and most recently Wicked Halo. 2 of those 3 ended up being sprinters. My Miss Aurelia is probably better going short too, but she would go on and win a Breeders' Cup juvenile filly. So there is hope for a filly who wins the Adirondack, but way more often than not. Again, that's just 3 in the last 15 years who had a lot of success. It is about being right now, not necessarily a prospect for the future when it comes to races like the Adirondack. And certainly the filly who was right this past weekend was bright work for John Ortiz. Now, she was trained by, a bigger name barn. Ortiz, a very solid Midwestern Oaklawn, Kentucky trainer, takes horses up to New York. If she was trained by a bigger barn, there'd probably be a bigger buzz. That's just the way it works. So if you like her and you want to keep following her, I think, like you said, the spin away at 7/8 of a mile makes a lot of sense. She could stay in New York and run around one turn in the Frizette until you get to the Breeders' Cup. You may not ever know if she can go around 2 turns. You find out there then for $1 million plus on the big day. Our third Breeders' Cup tracker horse to look at this weekend was in a turf sprint. We thought we'd be talking about Breeders' Cup champion Caravel, but it was Cogburn out of Texas taking the Troy Stakes for Steve Asmussen.
Nobles leads the way. Has it by about a half a length. Remuda in second. Caravel on the outside third, 2 lengths to make up. Cogburn is next, followed by Mr. Top of the stretch. And Nobles spurts clear by 2.5. Caravel has a lot of work to do in the center of the course. In the meantime, here comes Cogburn. And Cogburn has his sights on Nobles in the final 16th of a mile, and he collars him. It will be Cogburn on the outside, getting to the front. And Cogburn under Ricardo Santana Jr. wins the Troy. Nobles was second, Thin White Duke third, and Caravel finished fourth.
Former dirt sprinter moved to turf 2 starts ago, won both those. Now 3 for 3 in turf sprints for Steve Asmussen. It is a potential Breeders' Cup turf sprint kind of horse who would like Santa Anita better than this course condition, I would have to think, Jeff. My concern was he was going to get a great pace set up in here, but he had run at Lone Star, which is a really short crop, firm turf course, and I didn't know how he was going to get over a deeper track at Saratoga and a very heavy track that it turned out to be with the way the weather was. That was impressive because I thought he was going to be a top of the ground kind of horse. That's good for Santa Anita when he gets out that way.
Well, and it's good he's got the right style. I mean, these sprints are different kind of animal going 6.5. Yeah. I remember when the big one with Desert Code from way out of it down the hill a few years back, and I kept telling him, you wouldn't have won that race if it was at Keeneland. He said, of course I wouldn't have. It's a different race, Yeah. But the thing is, they ran 103 and change, which sounds like a pretty quick race, but truthfully, that course was a minimum of 10 lengths slow, going 5.5. And I think that really got to Caravel. She was laboring, and I didn't know whether Cogburn would handle it or not, but he obviously did. And here's a lightly raced 4-year-old who's only had 11 starts and 6 wins. Obviously, this was the best race of his life, but it was also his 3rd consecutive win. So he's getting better, and he's getting better. And now with the style of the late running type of style that he uses, although he used to be a speed horse, now he takes back and makes a run. I think you have to think of him as a serious Breeders' Cup turf sprint contender, or at least a factor in that race. I wouldn't completely rule out Caravel because I just don't understand why they ran her here. I mean, it's a grade 3. You want to keep, she's had 3 starts. She obviously can run well fresh. Was this like, we got nothing, we got a trainer, we might as well run her type of thing? Yeah. And I just don't know whether it was an afterthought or whatever the case was, but that was not something that I was expecting to see, and it's not something I think I would have done, quite frankly. I mean, give her another run before the Breeders' Cup, run her in the Breeders' Cup, and then put her away. I mean, that's how I would. I don't think she needed this race, but Red Cox has won more races than I have, so I'll defer to him.
Gives them more time to the Breeders' Cup, maybe, versus waiting for Kentucky Downs in another 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, and maybe running something there. But now that's probably checked off the list. You probably wouldn't want to go that route with her. Right. Maybe she goes back to Keeneland for Shakertown or something like that. That could fit the calendar. But we'll see what they do with Caravel moving forward. As for Cogburn, a good year for not this time the sire on the turf. We said, will this horse be better on the sprinting on the dirt or the turf? Not this time. Also the sire of Up to the Mark, the horse who was so good this spring and early summer, winning the Manhattan for Todd Pletcher, and winning on Derby Day on the in the Turf Classic. We haven't seen Up to the Mark since that race in the Manhattan. He's been off the work tab, Jeff, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with him. But when you look at these not this times, maybe you have to start thinking of them as maybe some turf horses as well. Well,
I mean, he's by Giants Causeway. There's certainly a right for him to be that. I remember betting on Cogburn on the Chick Lang on Preakness Day. I don't think I couldn't lose that race, but he did to Lightning Larry. There's no disgrace in that. Right. But That's when they were sending him,
Yeah.
And now, I don't know whether it's by design or whatever, but they let him settle and he blasts home. I mean, that works. And don't mess it up because that's what he wants to do.
Let's go to our final topic this week on It's Official, our stars of tomorrow. Jeff hinted that we had a really good one in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies division, potentially. Chad Brown unleashed a beast at Saratoga this past weekend named Ways and Means.
Here's Ways and Means sweeping up on the outside to take command. And it's lights out. Here's Ways and Means in a dazzling debut. Not being asked to run, yet pouring it on. 7, 8. It's going to be double digits for this brilliant filly, Ways and Means. The future is bright.
That's as good as we've seen so far this year, I think, in our Stars of Tomorrow segment for these summer races. This 2-year-old filly looks to be at the head of her class, Jeff. She's going to be tough.
She is a filly. I was reading, I think it was the DRF this morning, some quotes from Chad Brown. And Chad said that he had told Pratt in the paddock, sadly, he says, look, when you hit the front and the top of the stretch, don't let her run. Because if you do, she might win. I don't want a hard race like that. Just win as easy as you can possibly win. And you saw the video. He took hold at the 8 pole. He never let her run, and she still went off by the official margin was 12 3/4 lengths. And she did it the right way because it didn't look like she took a deep breath. And again, being by practical joke, you have to wonder, okay, how far does she really want to run? But I think what I've seen of practical joke and his offspring is they seem to want to run farther than he did. So I'm not that concerned about the 2 turns. And Chad saying that maybe he'll bring her back for the spin away. And then I don't know how that fits in terms of the timing for the Breeders' Cup, or maybe he'll wait. I don't know. But I had not really seen any 2-year-old Coulter filly at Saratoga this meeting that wowed me. I saw some horses that looked good, nice, whatever. This was the first one. This one was a blowout. And I think we absolutely saw a filly now, Ways and Means, who doesn't have to take a backseat to anybody, at least at this stage. She was just absolutely breathtaking.
She was indeed. Let's wrap up our 5 topics on the board and make them official. It was a somber Saturday at Saratoga. We saw Maple Leaf Mel give everything she had until the final strides of the test stakes in what was a sad day for all. The Babe is back. We saw Rick Dutrow win the Whitney Stakes with White Abarrio running a career best race as Cody's Wish disappointed in 3rd in his stretch out to 9 furlongs. We went across the pond to see 3 potential Breeders' Cup divisional players, and Paddington winning for the 7th time in a row, headlining that group. Our Breeders' Cup tracker took you to Del Mar for a Dare Manners win in the Clement Hirsch, Brightworks win at Saratoga in the Adirondack, and Cogburn's upset of Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint champion Caravel in the Troy Stakes at Saratoga. And our star of tomorrow, it's the Chad Brown trained Ways and Means. Those 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's the way this show works. We've got one bonus topic for you this week. Look, it was a tough show for the first 10 to 15 minutes. Topics we don't like discussing, we don't like to even think about, but we have to discuss those. We want to end on a positive note here. One of my favorite horses, the 10-year-old Welder, the all-time winningest horse at my old stomping grounds at Remington Park. Retired 2 years ago. He was relocated this week to Old Friends Farm in Kentucky. The owner here, Raymax Farms, Clayton Rash, had passed away. And so Welder's farm, his home, was uprooted. He needed a place to go and live out his retirement, and Old Friends took him in. He's the 265th horse to live at Old Friends Farm right now. He won 27 of 42 races lifetime, 16 of those wins at Remington Park. Jeff, the most wins by a horse ever over that oval. Top Oklahoma-bred sprinter, and there's been some good ones. And the timing couldn't be more right because coming up next month after the Remington Park meet opens in a couple of weeks, they've got the Oklahoma Horse Racing Hall of Fame induction, and Welder will be one of the horses inducted into the state's Horse Racing Hall of Fame. So good month for Welder, heading to Old Friends Farm and going to the Hall of Fame here in a couple of weeks.
I didn't realize they had that many horses there at that farm. So I've never been. Have you ever been there?
I have not been to Old Friends. Silver Charm, one of my all-time favorites, probably the most famous resident
Right.
of Old Friends Farm. So we're gonna have to make a trip there sometime.
I'd like to go for sure. I'm going to see Silver Charm and ring my finger at him because he cost me a Kentucky Derby. But other than that, I like him. Other than that, he's cool. I like him. But yeah, no, I mean that's a great honor for an Oklahoma based horse, and I'm sure because he's a gray, he'll get lots of lookers there.
They said the owner of Old Friends, Michael Blowen's a handicapper, and he had watched Welder run a bunch, so he knew about the horse from betting the races and playing. So never hurts to be in the winner's circle 27 times out of 44 to get noticed. But again, best of luck to Welder as he lives out the happy life there at Old Friends Farm. Look, if you want to donate to any of the racing charities for horses and the PDJF, we talked about the jockey fund last week with the karaoke. You know, weeks like we just had in racing will test your heart and test your mettle. If there's something you can do and would like to do for retirement plans for horses or for jockeys and charities like that, be sure to find out your most trusted and safest places to invest and to make your donations. Do your research, check things out. Certainly, I don't endorse one charity over another, but we did a lot with TRF over the years, Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation with Horse Player now. So there are a lot of great groups out there. Certainly, if you have the means to do and you have the interest in doing so, a recommended way to try to feel a little bit better about a tough week.
I agree, 100%.
So that's going to wrap things up for this edition of It's Official. Jeff and I will be back on Friday where we handicap weekend stakes races on our First Call podcast. So Jeff and I will look at an Arlington Million Week at Colonial Downs on Friday. That's the big race coming up this weekend. It'll also be the Express Bet race of the week. You can check that analysis out a little bit later on. On behalf of Jeff Siegel and myself, Jeremy Plonk, and everybody with First Bet, have a great week and tip your cap one last time to Maple Leaf Mel.